Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to join you remotely. I wish I could be there in person. What I'm going to speak about in the next 20, 25 minutes is really the role of a brand and how it's changing in the new normal. Before we get into how the role is changing, I wanted to give you a little bit of a background on how I think about brands. So fundamentally, I like to start with a quote from a former CEO of Unilever who's described brand as a storehouse of trust that matters more and more as choices multiply. What that really means is as people nowadays have too many options and too many choices in any type of product or in service, they rely on brands to simplify their lives, to make the choices easier. I was just watching recently the number of options people now have to stream, movies or any other type of material, entertainment material online. And there's so many different options. And so now really the decision is which brands will stand out, whether it's Netflix and HBO or Amazon Prime, but they're very, very hard to stand out because there's just too many options out there. So as the number of options increase, we rely a lot more on brands. The other distinction I want to point out, because I find it often gets very confusing to people and they sort of treat brand and product interchangeably. They think, Nike brand is the shoes, but Nike brand is not the shoes. The shoes are tangible. They can be copied. They're outdated and they continuously change. In fact, Nike changes its shoes every 12 to 18 months. Entire new set of shoes come out. But the Nike brand and what it stands for is relatively timeless, right? The brand is not in the product market. It's in people's mind. It's potentially timeless and it forms a basis of relationship. So if you look at Nike brand in the last 20 years, it really has stood for the very much the same things, or the Apple brand. But the products Apple makes or the services Apple provides keeps changing all the time. So it's important to decouple a brand from a product. And when you talk about branding, especially when I look at companies in China, you find that they often focus on being very tangible at the bottom of the triangle, if you like. What do I have? My product attributes or my benefits that are different from my competitors. What we find in mature markets is that a lot of branding is not at the bottom of the triangle, but at the top of the triangle. How do the brands differ in terms of emotional benefits? In terms of the goals for consumers, what goals do they satisfy for consumers? So fundamentally in good branding, you start at the bottom of the triangle. In the beginning of the life cycle of a product, you have some differences. But over time, those differences get imitated. And so there's fundamentally not a huge difference between the Colgate or Crest in toothpaste or Apple smartphone and a Samsung smartphone or a, smartphone from, any of the Chinese companies like Vivo and Oppo. And so fundamentally, we find good branding is really done at the top of the pyramid or top of the triangle, connecting much more to emotional benefits and to consumer goals. So let me give an example of what I mean by that. So this is the former chairman of De Beers who said, essentially, diamonds are practically worthless. Now, if you try to buy a diamond at a store, it's not going to be cheap. So how did he take a product that he said is fundamentally worthless and create a huge business out of it? It was not done at the bottom of the triangle. It was done at the top of the triangle, which is what does the brand mean in terms of an emotional benefits to consumers? So most diamonds are purchased, oftentimes historically by a man for a woman at the time they got engaged. And then of course it changed over time. But fundamentally the why of the diamonds is really the emotional benefit around love and commitment. So you show your love by buying a diamond at the time you got engaged. And the beauty of this whole branding was the love and commitment was tied to the size of the diamond. So as a result, if you got a diamond which is small, your friends would tell you, he must not love you very much, or he's not that committed. And so fundamentally, they took the bottom of the triangle, which is a functional benefit, the size of the diamond, and connected it to the top of the pyramid, which is the emotional benefit, the love and commitment. So good branding actually tries to connect the bottom of the pyramid, functional benefits, to the top of the pyramid, which is the emotional benefits or the goals that people have. So fundamentally, a lot of good branding is about emotions. It's not about functional differences. You will not see Nike talking about the features of its shoes or Apple talking about a new feature. Rarely would they do that. Only at the time of the launch, oftentimes they'll say the camera is new, but fundamentally the branding is around emotional connections to consumers. Now, what's happened in the last 5 to 10 years is really a movement around what we call purpose-driven brands. So let me explain what that means, because you see this in China and in the US as much as you see it in other parts of the world like India and Europe. So basically what's happened is the consumers are saying, I want to buy from companies whose values are aligned with my values. So it's not enough to make a good product, but I want to buy my product and service from a company who has the same value as I do. And here is Larry Fink, who is the CEO of an investment company, BlackRock, says to prosper over time, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. So typically the finance people really don't care about the society. It's all about the shareholder. And so fundamentally what Larry Fink is saying is that going forward, companies will need to cater to multiple stakeholders. Why? Because the consumers care about that. So here's some data point. The millennial consumers, which is really around half the market right now, globally, they are saying that they want to buy from companies who have the same belief as we do. And they don't want to buy from companies who violate these beliefs. These beliefs can be about the environment. It can be about the community. It can be about how you treat your employees. So fundamentally, you have to make not only good products or great products, but you also have to treat your environment well. You have to treat your community well. So that's led to some very interesting data. This is from US, but I've seen similar data from China, where it says 57% of Americans are belief-driven buyers who report choosing, switching, avoiding, or boycotting a brand because of its stand on a social issue. 64% said that CEOs should take a lead on change rather than waiting for the government to impose it. So fundamentally, there's a shift here in branding that I not only have to create a connection between my functional benefit and the emotional benefit, now I need to consider the broader stakeholders and how much it matters to consumers. So here's an example of branding on broader issues than just what consumers care about. So Volvo, as you know, is owned by Geely, the Chinese company, and their big feature is around safety. But safety is a benefit for the consumer. What is the value of Volvo to the environment? And this is the electric car and the hybrid, which this says better for the environment. And so here's a campaign they created. Let me play it.
Do you recall not long ago, we would walk on the sidewalk, all around the wind blows, we would only hold on to let go, blow a kiss into the sun, we need someone to lean on, blow a kiss into the sun, all we need is somebody to lean on, all we need is someone to lean on.
So what Volvo did here is it connected the branding of protection or safety for family to protection of the environment, which is what the belief-driven consumer cares about. So simultaneously, good branding takes your value proposition and connects it not only to the benefit in the category, but also what does it mean for the community or the environment. And that's what's nice about this. Here's another example of Life Water, which is a brand of Pepsi. It's just ordinary water, if you like, but it's priced premium. It's at a premium price. And so what's the branding done on? So what's the emotional benefit? Because the water is the same water. It's not any better water. But if you look at the photographs on it, it's artists' paintings. And they said we support art, and people who care about the arts and culture and want arts and culture in the community to be supported are going to buy Life Water and carry it with them. It's Life Water, a lot of the water you drink in the US, you drink outside the home. And so this allows you to carry a bottle and show the person who supports the arts and culture. So fundamentally, the branding was based not even on the product attributes, because the water is the same. It was really based on the belief-driven consumer that you care about the arts, we also care about arts and we support them. And if you buy our water, we'll donate some amount of money to supporting arts and culture in the United States. So let's talk a little bit about, now that we have talked about how branding works, what's happening during the COVID. Last 6 months, most of the people have been staying at home globally. So there's some interesting new, behaviors that we have noticed. So one is that the brand itself, people are trying new brands. Why? Because there was a shortage. So as soon as there was a shortage, people were going away from the brand that they were using right now and said, I cannot find my toilet paper or I cannot find my regular soap. Let me try something else. And so when they try something else, fundamentally, it means that your brand loyalty might potentially weaken because you try something and you like it. You also notice an interesting trend in the US, the brands that were familiar but had become old-fashioned, like Heinz, Heinz ketchup or Campbell's soup or Kellogg's cereal. Suddenly we found that people were reaching out for the familiar. So one theory is that when people are stressed out, as during COVID, you reach out for familiarity. So during the pandemic, we see an increase in sales for the brands that were considered old-fashioned almost. So Budweiser beer or Campbell's soup or Kellogg's cereal started to go up. So that's very interesting because they were losing sales to, new type of healthy granolas or to craft beer or to hard seltzer, but fundamentally under stress, people came back to their familiar brands. The other big trend we notice is what's happening because of the impact on economy. We find that the share of the lower price brands, what's known as a private label or generics, have started to increase, right? So if you look at the data of how many people are unemployed or underemployed and how long this financial crisis is going to last. So this is not only a health crisis, it's a financial crisis. And so fundamentally, when you talk to companies, they're thinking about how do I launch a lower priced version of my brand? Because in the next 12 to 24 months, if I don't do that, I'm going to lose share to the low price brands. So fundamentally, the private labels in the US have started to increase share. Not surprisingly, people are not going out as much. So the status consumption that, you buy the luxury goods, they were going to be impacted. So if you look at while the sales have started to come back of luxury goods, they're still down from the year below. And there's an interesting, observation here. Do people need the same amount of luxury goods if they're not going to be going out as much? But in Europe and US, people are still not dining out. People are still not going to the movies or the theaters or the museums. So fundamentally, if you don't go out as much, the luxury goods are going to suffer, and the type of branding that you see is also going to change. You're going to see less of the big logos on the t-shirts or the dresses, because in the time when the economy is down or health crisis there, people don't like to be, communicating status. So ultimately, we're going to see a shift here. The luxury companies in general are actually doing okay, but fundamentally, the sales are going to be impacted in the short run. The other interesting trend is, of course, what we call about the changes in consumers' adoption of technologies. So a lot of technologies that consumers were being told to adopt by companies, such as digital payments or contactless, or use online shopping, penetration was low in the US. The research has now shown that what happened in the last 6 months would have taken 3 or 4 or 5 years to reach that level of penetration. We are seeing in the US is the digital has increased the adoption of technologies very rapidly. So for example, if you're a 60-year-old or 70-year-old and you didn't go to the bank, you didn't use the ATM or online banking, now because the banks were closed, even these people have started to do online banking. So you see a big shift in channels, and that has a lot of implications for cost, marketing and branding overall. As I said, the belief-driven consumer really cares about all the stakeholders, not just how good a product it is. So here's some example of some data on a survey of consumers. 76% said it cares about how you treat your employees during the pandemic. 64% said they care about the purpose or mission of the company. 67% said they care about, do you operate in my community? Do you make a positive impact on the society and environment? So what this shows is that the consumer doesn't only care about how good is your product, but how well is the company embedded in the values that I have, which is about my society, about the community, about how you treat your employees and environment and so forth. So fundamentally what this has done, in the US at least, we had a big movement in the last, started around, a few months ago, around racial or social justice. And so brands have started paying attention to this. If consumers care about the brand's view on social justice, then I need to be able to communicate about that. So Nike has a really campaign around their famous slogan around just do it, and they switched it to don't do it. And so fundamentally, don't be racist, don't say some of the things. So it's a very exciting campaign. And the idea really here was to say that we not only made great shoes or athletic footwear, we also care about racial justice. Here's an example, I think, talking about, in sports, how do we take out sort of racial inequality and social justice? How do we bring it to sports? Let's look at the campaign. And so now we notice that some of the other things the pandemic has done is in terms of, there's less social gatherings. And so as a result, there could be some less emphasis on focus on personal appearance. So you're mostly on remote calls, whether it's Zoom or Skype or any other system that you're using. And so the sales of certain type of cosmetics are down, but sales of other types of products might increase. So fundamentally, looking at the demand and what the brand can do for demand is very critical in these cases. Let me give you an interesting example with chewing gum. So chewing gum is also, a lot of the sales are in social settings because you're trying to, when you talk to somebody at it closely, you want to make sure you don't have bad breath. But if you're not having those meetings at a close level, the gum sales were actually down because of that. But another area, the gum sales increased because people were playing a lot of video games. And when you're playing video games, you need to focus, and chewing gum can help you focus. So really understanding the shift in demand and how the brand needs to make sure that it captures that new shift in demand is really critical. We found that with the air care products, this is air fresheners that you might use in the house. Again, people are spending a lot of time at home, and what are they missing? They're missing going out, they're missing, certain types of memories that they might have. And now the marketing of these products is not around, hey, you might have some visitors coming and your house doesn't smell good because no one is visiting you now, but it's really about creating a comfort around your house so you can have a good time and you can cocoon yourself. And so fundamentally what this means is branding needs to shift how it frames its value because of the shift in consumer goals. So a couple of examples that I'll give you here is, on a lot of the money is being spent around home furnishing. So if you look at the sales for companies like Home Depot in the US or Lowe's or computers or tablets, that has increased because that helps you. It's not a luxury anymore. It helps you do your job, right? So fundamentally, it's become an essential. Once something becomes an essential, it's easy to spend the money. So if you look at a cable company like, Comcast or Spectrum, which provides, cable services in the US, now suddenly it's not for entertainment only, it's for education. So framing the value from entertainment to education really is very valuable for Spectrum and Comcast. So shifting how you frame the value of it. And the last example I want to share is around toothpaste. Toothpaste is now finding even a basic product like that on the left, you talk about cosmetic value, whiter teeth. But now they are shifting to talking about the health value. Because of COVID, everybody's thinking about health. That's the new essential. So how do I connect to health? And emphasizing that is what Colgate and others are doing, because that's what the consumer cares about. So let me just conclude by saying that, fundamentally, brands are about a couple of different things. The functional benefit is a very small part of branding. You really need to tie to the emotional benefits or consumer goals. What problem can you solve for consumers? But a shift has taken place in the last 5-10 years, and COVID has accelerated that shift, which is fundamentally, I care about not just the value of the product, but what else does the company do for the community, for the employees, for the environment? And the brands that can do that are going to be more successful in the marketplace of the new normal. Thank you.